Hello, 4th and 5th grade. It is Wednesday. This I have on here, April 28th. Maybe I've got myself all out of schedule, but I'm not posting the video until April 29th. So I might have to double check myself here in the future. So my plan was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So what I have here is the Think Like a Statistician thinking frame. And I have the graph for today. And what I did was I have pulled up the graph on the screen beside me. So I think what I'm going to do is make sure that you can see my thinking frame. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this in present mode. Sorry, I'm testing waters here. Oops, that didn't work. It clicked on something else. So make sure you are looking at, it says April 28th. April 29th is the date that we're working on this. I must not have checked for setting this out there for you. And then you should also be looking, I tore mine off. If you have the paper copy, you can tear yours off too. But I'm looking at the common injuries for boys among popular high school sports. That's the graph we're looking at. And this is from the National High School Sports Related Injury Surveillance Study. This is another one of those graphs from the New York Times. And notice the scale here, injuries per 10,000 competition plays. Okay, so every time they play, for 10,000 of those. And let me see here. And so we have football, hockey, wrestling. I'm going to put like an FHW, lacrosse, soccer, and basketball. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to blow this up on my computer so that when I talk to you, that we're looking at the same thing and I can clarify. So the top circle, this is going to be head. This one is going to be shoulder. We have arms. This is saying trunk. And these are the same words all on each one of these pictures, I guess. I have no idea what's going on with my computer. I just want to see this nice and big. And it is doing all kinds of other stuff. I'm not sure what that one is, so we'll come back to, oh, it's hand. Thigh. Knee. This says lower leg. And this one says ankle. Now, like I said, if you have the digital copy, you can see the numbers a little bit better. I think to answer our questions, though, we're not necessarily going to need to study the numbers. Okay, so what we're seeing here is how injuries compare on different parts of the body for each sport, and this is for 10,000. So when I see that it's 10,000, this would be like this head injury, that would be 34 out of 10,000. Okay, so in order for us to kind of think about it, because it's not in percents might help you with this a little bit. So you could easily go ahead and make these into percents by just making this the decimal. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. if that's going to help you out. Okay, so that's what this is a decimal. Multiply that by 100 to get the percent. This is going to be like 3.4. No, it's not. It's going to be 0.34. So less than a half, much less than a 0.5%. Okay, so that would be an example of just how like 34 head injuries, well, for 10,000 plays, that's 0.34%. Okay, so just to kind of give you an idea of how these numbers would look and compare if we were thinking about them in terms of percents. That would be head injuries for football for 10,000 plays. Okay, so less than a 0.5%, barely over 0.25%. All right, so just kind of getting a feel for it. Those are the different types of injuries from each sport. Okay, and we can see some injuries, like then we see that the circle kind of helps us compare too. Like the circle for the head injuries compared to football injuries for the head, difference in sizes there. Okay, so there are fewer. We can see that in that circle as well. Okay, so ankle injuries, we're going to have more of those in football and basketball compared to wrestling. And it's actually interesting. We have more ankle injuries in high school boys, okay, in basketball and football, more even compared to soccer. It's interesting to me because soccer is like all foot. Okay, so just studying the graph a little bit, just like you would with any other graph, right? 4th and 5th grade, in order to answer questions or to be beginning to think about the graph, we have to know what is going on in the graph. What are they sharing with us? What are they telling us? So let's go ahead and go to our thinking frame. And I like this thinking frame for a couple of reasons. Okay, you guys are going to like it as well, I hope. One, the topic. We're thinking like a statistician here. The topic might be fractions. The topic might be geometry, stuff like that, guys. That's what your focus is. But from there, we're going to think in all of these different directions. And I say all of these different directions, and it's really kind of ironic because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 directions. I'm not giving you a lot of directions to think because think about like your day. When you have 400 things on your schedule and your brain is going 400 different directions, does any one of those 400 things have your full attention? No, you're not giving it your best thoughts. You're not putting your best effort into that thing because you're already thinking about the next 399 things that you have to do. So while I'm giving you a complex graph to think about, and I want you to do good thinking, I'm only giving you 4 areas that I really want you to focus your thinking, okay? So this is a frame. It's called a frame. It's one of the depth and complexity tools that is out there for us to take what we know, what we understand, and push our thinking, okay? To stretch our brains. And we talk all the time about we've got to work out our brains to build that muscle in our brain, okay? So this is another way for us to do that. So depth and complexity is just taking what we know and understand and pushing it for our understanding and making us really think about how do I understand it? How can I use it? And putting it in new situations. So when we're thinking like a statistician then is somebody who studies the statistics, the results, the outcomes. So when we're studying these graphs, doing these graph analyses, we are becoming statisticians. So things I want us to think about, and I'm going to go clockwise, starting at the top. I'm going to share some thoughts. My thoughts are not the only thoughts. My thoughts are not always the right thoughts. You might be able to defend your thoughts way better than I can, okay? But the idea is the thinking, all right? So we're going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to share a couple of ideas, and then I'll ask you to add 1 or 2 of your own. If you've worked ahead on this, you might already have some ideas jot down in here. If you don't feel like you have enough room in the frame, you can always add another slide to the Google Slide set if you're working digitally, or you can just write these thoughts on a separate sheet of paper And if you're going to do that, find a way to organize them. Don't rewrite the question. And since I'm going to work clockwise, I'll just go ahead and put A, B, C, D. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share 1 or 2 thoughts in each of the box, each frame, okay, with you. And then I would like you to go ahead and add some of your own. Now, I would really like if you could come back and like in a comment or an email and share with me some of the things that you thought differently than me, and maybe some of the things that when you were having a discussion with your family that you kind of came up with. Sorry, I hit the focus button. That you came up with in discussion with your family. Now, again, I know the paper copy of the graph is hard to see. So if you can, go ahead and get on to the Google Classroom, go into the slides. It's also in there. And the numbers are a little bit easier to read, not a ton, but you can always zoom in on that and clear that up a little bit. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm going to share a couple of ideas in each one, but I'm going to leave it open for you to add 1 or 2 ideas as well. Okay, so we're thinking like a statistician about common injuries for boys among popular high school sports and the related graph. Do any ethical issues arise from the presentation of this data? So remember, some of you have had experience with this before, but ethical issues are looking at the right or wrong of it. Like, what is it pushing in a direction to help us decide if it's right or wrong? Like, does this graph persuade us in any way or form, right or wrong, good or bad, and in the way that this data is presented or the actual numbers themselves to create ethical issues? So I'm going to let you think about that for a second. Now, 5th grade, you have depth and complexity icons in your Google Classroom that you can kind of revisit. Okay, 4th grade, that is something I'm going to make a note right now to myself to make sure that I get in there for you. 4th grade, depth and complexity icons and meaning. So that'll help you in the future to kind of refer to some of these things. So this one would be ethics. So the symbol for this one kind of looks like this. Okay. And this is looking at moral principles, conflicts surrounding different points of view of events, ideas, or issues, maybe including bias, values, or judgments. So when you're looking at this graph of these injuries for high school boys in these sports, do you see any ethical issues? One thing that I think of, okay, is should, I'm going to use HS for high school boys, play football? Remember, that's become a hot topic because of concussions. Because of the large, now I'm saying large number based on this graph, right? Large number of head injuries. That's an ethical issue. And you actually see a lot of arguments out there. Like if you would go out and research this, you would see a lot of people who would fight one way or the other on this issue. So one ethical issue would be, should they be playing because of the head injuries? What other ethical issues? I think I mentioned the other day that maybe the ethical issue is because of these injury rates, should girls be allowed to play these sports? I'm going to put permitted. These sports. Only recently did Minerva start their own girls wrestling club. So that's always a hot topic. Women's hockey teams are out there, but you're going to find people who are like adamant that no, that is a man's sport kind of thing. And the same with football. We see basketball is definitely a much more balanced, and not the balanced, most balanced, but much more balanced, especially in high school for playing. But like the ethical issues would be the moral issues, because some people really believe that there's male role and female role, and should they be doing those things? That becomes an ethical issue. This is where we're emphasizing here, should boys, because remember, you're not fully physically mature as a high school student. So should boys be allowed to play? So here it's based on physical maturity. And then here for the girls, it's just, it's more of a male versus female kind of argument. Okay, so those would be ethical issues. Can you think of a third one? And again, you don't have to think of it right now on the spot. Maybe you've already thought of one and you already had it filled in your box. Great, share it with me. Maybe this is something you sit down and have a conversation with your family about. I would be interested to see the different ideas that your family has in the discussion. All right. So remember, the cool thing about doing videos with this, okay, is that you can pause. Like if you're not ready to go on to the next question because you're having that conversation or whatever, go ahead and hit pause. Come back to it. No big deal. All right. So let's go ahead on to the next question. From whose perspective is this data given? Now remember, this is common injuries for boys among popular high school sports. Whose perspective? So on our depth and complexity icons, perspective is going to be a little pair of glasses. Okay, so when we're talking about perspectives, different points of view on the idea, event, people, or issue, including roles, ROLES, like who should be doing what, careers, field, or opposing viewpoints. So whose perspective is this data given? I'm thinking like high school athletic associations would be interested in this data, right? It might be given for them, high school athletic associations. And maybe choosing to decide which sport to offer or which sport to remove from their offerings. Whose perspective? So again, we're considering whose different points of views may this impact. Parents, right? They might use this as an argument. No, you may not play lacrosse. Look at the number of knee injuries. I don't know. Okay. Although lacrosse and wrestling and hockey, lacrosse and soccer share about the same number of head injuries. Wrestling not far from them. Hockey's much more. And then football's like 3 times. So this might be perspective that might come from parents in defending their child or arguing against their child for a sport. Who else's perspective? This might be for a coach. Say, this is why you need to wear a helmet when you play football. Look at the number of head injuries, right? I guess I should make that plural, coaches. Who else? Whose perspective is this data given? Why did they feel the need to conduct this study? I have lots of unanswered questions. I'm glad that's the next one. So see if you can come up with 1 or 2 more perspectives. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and go on to the unanswered questions. I'm trying to use different colors for different ones here. So the unanswered questions are down here at the bottom. So this is another icon for depth and complexity. And this one's just 3 little question marks. And it says, what unanswered questions arise from this graph? I have so many. 1. I forgot my question. Why just boys sports? Are you defending a sport with this? Or are you opposing a sport? I don't know what the whole purpose is here. I mean, it's giving me data, but how can I use that data? Another question. Would you be persuaded to play or not play a sport based on this data? I want to know, how long was the study conducted? It says over a number of plays, but is it over a period of time? I also like to know when, not just how long, but when. Like, there's no date on these statistics. So is this like 2010? Is this 1999? Which then gives me another question. How have these stats changed? And I'm going to abbreviate over time. And I ran right off the page. See if you can come up with, that was my question number 5. See if you can come up with 1 more question. Now, good questions. I think my number 3 is not the greatest one, But when we're asking, like even number 4, those could be answered, right? So those aren't really deep questions. They're questions that are not answered currently, but I could find the answers. How have these stats changed? That would take more work. That wouldn't be just a quick Google answer. Why just boys sports? Even like, how do girls sports compare? That would be another question you could ask. Okay. So you want the questions that aren't just quick surface Googly questions. And by Google, I mean I can type it in and find the answer. Okay. You want to think more about the how questions and the why questions. Those are good unanswered questions. Those are deep questions. So again, go ahead and take some time. Think about it. You can always come back to it. You can pause it. I'm going to go ahead for the sake of our video because we're pushing 25 minutes already. And I'm going to move on to the last one here. What is the big idea the creator of this graph is trying to communicate? So the big idea icon is when we're talking about the main idea, general information. So it looks like this. It's got like 4 pillars. And then it's got a little roof on it. Kind of looks like a Parthenon. Okay, and it's a general statement, general principle, theory, concept, or idea. You might have like a universal concept or generalization here. So what is the big idea of this graph? I kind of feel like this one could be on the surface, but like as you start thinking on your own, you might come up with some other ideas about what they're trying to say here. For example, they might be trying to tell us which sports are safest or most dangerous. Again, I'm going to use HS for high school boys. Another big idea might be to present, I'm trying to think how I want to word it. Greatest injuries. Oops, I forgot the I in there. Injuries to high school boys in sports. So greatest, that's the measurable part of that. That's not the same as the most dangerous sport. That's saying, okay, so like football has the greatest head injuries. Wrestling, soccer, and lacrosse have about the same knee injuries. I'm trying to look here. Basketball has the least lower leg injuries, or actually, no, it looks like this is a 1. Lacrosse and wrestling have lower leg injuries that are also pretty small. So different things, just comparing. While we think, like in my mind, wrestling is a very physical sport. It's whole body. And football is a very physical sport, but like you wear pads to protect you. In wrestling, you don't. So comparing the injuries between protected and unprotected sports. Even hockey has significantly less injuries in general compared to football. And it is also a protected sport. Like you're covered in pads and a helmet, and skates are dangerous and the high sticks are dangerous. But interesting. So what other big idea do you think the creator of the graph is trying to communicate? So I'm going to let you think on that one. So again, I gave you some ideas. You might have different ideas than me, and that's okay. I would love to hear what some of your ideas and thoughts were. Again, if you don't have them right now, come back to it. Have a discussion with your family. This is going to be awesome for having a discussion with your family. And add to them later. You can always email me or comment what some of your questions were, or like even my ethical issues. Those are almost unanswered questions because they're things that this data wouldn't help me consider, but maybe not answer. And the issues, I guess, would be more of the physical maturity in the male versus female in sport argument. Should girls be playing this sport kind of thing? Those are more of the ethical issues there. So maybe start with a question on that one and then get to like, what is this question really about? Get to its main idea. So I think if you jot some more of your ideas down, have those conversations with your family, I think it would be a really cool conversation to have. And if you have trouble seeing the graph, go ahead and jump into Google Classroom and look it up in the classwork. All right, friends. So that was our first thinking frame. Like I said, we're going to move forward using thinking frames through the rest of the year, and we'll be using those with our theme relationships. So we're practicing using the frames by doing graph analysis right now. So kind of wrapping up the graph analysis, but at the same time using a new tool. So if you have any questions, email me and I will talk to you soon. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. Bye-bye.